प्रशान्तमभयं प्रतिबोधमात्रम् शुद्धं समं सरसता परमात्मतत्त्वम् शब्दो न यत्र पुरुकारकवान् क्रियार्थो माया परत्यभाविमुख्ये च विलज्जमाना तद्वै पदं भगवता परमस्य पुंसो रामेति यद्विदुरजस्रसुखं विशोकम् As the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief, that is certainly the ultimate phase of the supreme enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter, uncontaminated and without distinctions. He is the principal primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Supreme Enjoyer, the personality of Godhead, is the Supreme Brahman, or the summum bonum, because of his being the supreme cause of all causes. The conception of impersonal Brahman realization is the first step, due to his distinction from the illusory conception of material existence. In other words, impersonal Brahman is a feature of the Absolute distinct from the material variegatedness, just as light is a conception distinct from its counterpart, darkness. But the light has its variegatedness, which is seen by those who further advance in the light. And thus, the ultimate realization of Brahman is the source of Brahman light, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the summum bonum, or the ultimate source of everything. Therefore, meeting the personality of Godhead includes the realization of the impersonal Brahman, as realized at first in contrast with material inebriety. The personality of Godhead is the third step of Brahman realization, as explained in the first canto. One must understand all three features of the Absolute, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Om Agyantimidandasya Gyananjana Chalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. This great Acharya of our disciplic succession, Lord Brahma, is herein continuing this most illustrious glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the eternal cause of all causes, the source of the impersonal Brahman, and the localized Paramatma within the heart of every living being. Srimad Bhagavatam specifically explains the supreme absolute truth in his original form of Krishna, and how he is beyond all material designations within this illusory energy, and in whom all sacrifices are meant to ultimately be enjoyed. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the Paramhamsa Samhita. It is especially meant to be enjoyed with transcendental senses by the most liberated, highly realized devotees of the Lord. And it is only through hearing from the disciplic succession of such great souls that we can understand the actual truth of the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. One of the great and most important commentators of Srimad Bhagavatam is Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. Today, by the causeless mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we are allowed to observe and celebrate the glorious event of his disappearance. Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur extracted the sweetest essence of the transcendental knowledge of Srimad Bhagavatam and presented it in such a wonderful way that from that time all of the commentators of Srimad Bhagavatam utilized the great knowledge and inspiration of Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur as the very foundation of their explanations. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was a supreme example in his life of pure unalloyed devotional service. And we would like, with the permission of the Vaishnavas, to make a feeble and humble attempt to describe but a drop from the ocean of the divine qualities within the story of the life of this very great Paramhamsa Acharya. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur declared Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur to be the guardian, protector of our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya within a particular, very difficult period within the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He was born, or let us say he appeared within this world in the holy village of Devagram in the Radhadesh area of Bengal. It is explained that when he was born in the house of his mother and father, the most unbelievably illustrious spiritual light completely filled the home. It was literally pulsating, reverberating, this light, as it filled all the atmosphere and attracted everyone. And when people came through this natural attraction to see the child was such a reservoir of love, of prema, that anyone who would pick him up and hold him to their chest, they just never wanted to let him go. They never wanted to be separated from him. One who is surrendered to the all-attractive Krishna naturally becomes all-attractive to those who are so fortunate to receive that natural perception. When he was a young child, he was simply not interested in any of the playful games of ordinary children. His only interest was in hearing and studying Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, his father was named Ram Narayan Chakravarty, and he had two elder brothers. One was named Sri Rambhadra Chakravarty, and he was a very, very, very pure devotee who had such deep transcendental insight into Srimad Bhagavatam. He was a great scholar. And his next brother was Sri Raghunath Chakravarty, who was also a very great pure devotee and who also was a very wonderful scholar of Srimad Bhagavatam. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was the youngest son of Ram Narayan Cakravarty, and his eldest brother, Ram Bhadra, became his Shiksha Guru and began to teach him the principles of bhakti according to Srimad Bhagavatam. For many years, Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur studied with great care under Ram Bhadra, and he showed complete detachment from material world. Because as one studies Srimad Bhagavatam, it is explained there, Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayochata Janayatya Shubhairagyam Jnanam Chayadohaitakam. Naturally one becomes attached to Krishna, filled with knowledge and detached from everything of this world. So as a very child, he became the very embodiment of vairagya or renunciation due to his constant absorption in the teachings of Srimad Bhagavat. So his parents became very worried, and they decided that he should be married. So they married him to a very, very beautiful young lady. Her name was Vibha. And after marriage, he simply had no concern with a home, with a wife, with anything of this world. He just was concerned with chanting the holy names, studying Srimad Bhagavatam, and being with devotees. So after he learned for so many years from his brother decided he needed higher training. So he sent him from Devagram to a village called Shayadabad, where there was a very, very great acharya living. His name was Sri Krishna Charan Cakravarty. Now he has a very interesting story. If you remember, in Pune we were describing the pastimes of Ramchandra Kaviraj and Narottam Das Thakur. How one time they saw two young children, Hari Ram and Ram Krishna, who were with some goats and some lambs and little cows, babies, and they were bringing them to be offered to Goddess Durga on the order of their father. But Narottam Das Thakur and Ramchandra Kaviraj convinced them that you should be kind to all living beings. We are all eternal servants of Krishna. And when they heard the beautiful dissertation of Krishna Bhakti from the lips of Narottam and Ramchandra, they let go of the animals and surrendered and became great devotees in disciplic succession. So this Ram Krishna was the disciple of Narottam Das Thakur, and Hari Ram became the disciple of Ramchandra Kaviraj. Ram Krishna had one son, and this son was named Sri Krishna Charan. And if you remember, after Ram Krishna and Hari Ram became devotees, the greatest pandit and scholar of all the area, whose name was Ganga Narayan Cakravarty, upon seeing these two young children become such illustrious Vaishnavas, he was thinking that what am I doing, wasting my time studying all the scriptures without bhakti, without surrendering to our Paramhamsa. So weeping and crying that all knowledge of the Vedas, which he had so deeply grasped in the public's eyes, it was all a waste if it does not culminate in serving a great soul. So Ganga Narayan Cakravarty surrendered to Narottam Das Thakur. He had a wife of the name Vishnupriya, and he had one daughter named Krishnapriya. But he had no son. So Ramakrishna, his son, Krishna Charan, was adopted by Ganga Narayan Cakravarty. And he became his favorite and very beloved disciple. He treated him like a disciple and a son. It was this Sri Krishna Charan that Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was sent by his brother to study under. So for many years he studied Srimad Bhagavatam from Sri Krishna Charan Cakravarty. And the beautiful relationship between guru and disciple was something so sweet and wonderful. And then Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur decided that he should take initiation. So he asked for initiation. But at the time, Sri Krishna Charan was very old. And he said that you should accept a spiritual master who can continue to guide you for many, many years. And due to my age, it is not possible. So his very, very dear and beloved disciple was Radharaman Cakravarty. So he instructed Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur to accept initiation from Sri Radharaman Cakravarty, who was the disciple of Sri Krishna Charan Cakravarty, who was the disciple of Ganga Narayan Cakravarty, who was the disciple of Narottam Das Thakur, who was the disciple of Lokanath Goswami, who was the disciple of Lord Sri Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And this way we have our disciplic succession. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, although very young, was studying so deeply the subject of Sanskrit and the subject of the various teachings of the six Goswamis, especially Sri Jiva Goswami's Satsandarbhas. And soon he began a school, and many people of all ages, especially young people, were coming to learn both Sanskrit as well as the teachings of the six Goswamis. And sometimes he would give classes, and sometimes he would invite his spiritual master, Sri Radharaman Cakravarty, to preach to his students, and soon he became very, very famous. People were coming from all around to study under Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur's expert guidance. He had grasped the essence of the Goswami's teachings like no one else of the time, and was able to present it so eloquently. And it was at that time that he wrote three very important and famous literatures. One was called the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu Bindu, which was just a very short notes of the essence of the basic teachings of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And then he wrote the Ujjvala Nilamani Kiran, which was a very short summary study of the essence of Rupa Goswami's Ujjvala Nilamani. And he wrote the Bhagavatamrita Khana, which was the essence described in very short codes of Rupa Goswami's Lagu Bhagavatamrita. And to this day, the village of Shayadabad is eternally famous because these three works were composed there by Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. Still, he would contact his brother Rambhadra and study with him. And one day he approached his brother and said, "I have some questions for you. If you kindly give permission, I will ask the question." And his brother said, Have you studied the entire Srimad Bhagavatam? He said, "I have recited and studied the entire Srimad Bhagavatam." He said, "Well, before you ask a question, you recite the entire Srimad Bhagavatam very carefully once again." You see, in those days, people did not ask questions whimsically. They were very careful about asking proper questions. So he again read the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, and he came to his brother, and he said, "I have a deep longing to go to Vrindavan." So his brother gave permission. And then he went to his spiritual master, Sri Radharaman Cakravarty, and with great love he gave him permission to go to Vrindavan. Now the situation of Vrindavan at that time was very, very heartbreaking. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur wanted to go there to try to help the Vaishnavas. Because as we know, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally went to Vrindavan. He danced through all the 12 fourths in great ecstasy, chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And he personally uncovered many of the holy places, such as Radha Kund and Shama Kund in Aritagram. And then he sent Srila Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, to specifically uncover and excavate the holy places of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, to establish beautiful temples and teach people how to worship the deity within the temples, to illustrate by their behavior proper Vaishnava etiquette and the conduct of those in the renounced order, and to write books extracting the very, very highest essence of all the Vedas, which is unalloyed devotion to Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. But unfortunately, shortly after Srila Jiva Goswami disappeared from this world and his intimate disciples started disappearing in this world, Vrindavan was attacked by the great and wicked Mughal conqueror Aurangzeb. And how he devastated Vrindavan. He marched in with his soldiers, and they went to Mathura, where there was a beautiful temple that cost, in those days, millions and millions of rupees to build. It was the Adi Keshava temple. It was right on Krishna's birthplace in Mathura. And Aurangzeb completely demolished it. And the deity had to be hidden and taken secretly out of Braja to Rajasthan. And by Aurangzeb's terrible rule, the Radha Govinda temple was very much dismantled and destroyed, and they were defacing all the temples. And they were doing obscene, terrible methods to contaminate the temples. And they were murdering ruthlessly the pujaris and the Vaishnavas. And whatever young women in Braja they were raping, plundering. They set up in Gokul and Mahavan, in Mathura, in Vrindavan, they set up different gates where there were guards to help to not allow any pilgrims in, to not allow anyone to escape without being tortured or killed. Any place they found the wonderful, wonderful excavations of the Goswamis, they were either destroying it or defacing it. But somehow or other, by the great devotion of the Brijbasis, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they managed to secretly remove the primary deities of Vrindavan, Radha Govinda, Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Gopinath, Radha Damodar, Radha Vinod, and so on. And they brought them to Rajasthan, where the king of Jaipur, Maharaj Jai Singh, would protect them. Because of the influence of Aurangzeb and his soldiers, the whole culture of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was practically finished. No one could preach, no one could practice, all their temples were gone, defunct. People were killed. There was no spirit. And because of that, so many nonsense, rascal philosophy started coming up. Deviations. When Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur arrived in Vrindavan, he was horrified, he was shocked, he was broken-hearted. This is the place that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so enthusiastically, with such love, ordered the Goswamis to build and develop. And actually, before Aurangzeb came, Vrindavan was the most beautiful, wonderful, holy place in all of existence. There was just incredible temples, beautiful gardens. Every place that Krishna performed his pastimes that was revealed was just so beautifully decorated, so beautifully worshipped in every way. Even with one's material eyes, one could see the spiritual world and feel the spiritual world the way the Goswamis and their associates developed Vrindavan Dham and excavated it. But now it was simply a place of devastation and depression and sadness. So Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, he began to roam through the various forests of Braja, and ultimately he came to Sri Radha Kund, where he decided to settle down. There at Radha Kund, in the Bhajan Kutir of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, was still living one of the very dearmost disciples of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. His name was Mukunda Das. This Mukunda Das was so dear to Krishnadas Kaviraj. He helped him in so many ways and very, very attentively learned from him, as well as from Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. After Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami left the world, Mukunda Das was in an ocean of sorrow and grief. But then Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, he appeared, and he gave great happiness to Mukunda Das, who began to also instruct him in Srimad Bhagavatam. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur understood that it was the desire of the Lord that he revive the culture of Vaishnavism in Vrindavan and uncover again the places that were practically completely lost. But he felt a great need for association of someone who could help him. And he prayed to the Supreme Personality of Godhead with such devotion, please someone, send someone who can help me. Because understand what a challenge it was. It was a total risk of life. It was an insurmountable task. To take something devastated recently and bring it back to life. Plus there were so many opposing philosophies. There was Sahajiyism was rampant. The caste Goswamis were rampant. The Muslims were still in rule and very dangerous. But Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, understanding the will of the Lord, knew for all generations to come, Vrindavan must be reestablished as a holy place. So as he prayed, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and his eternal consort, Srimati Radharani, sent a very special devotee, especially to help Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur in this paramount, inconceivable mission he embarked upon. And this was Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. Baladev Vidyabhushan was born in the Balasore area in a village near Remuna in Orissa. And he had studied the teachings of Shankaracharya, and then he studied the teachings of Madhvacharya, and he was convinced that bhakti was the highest principle. And he went to Jagannath Puri, and there, after traveling and meeting so many great holy men and saintly people, he decided to take shelter of the Tattvavadis, the great teachers of Madhvacharya's line. And there he received initiation and he became the foremost scholar of the whole Madhva Sampradaya. In fact, the Madhva Sampradaya in Jagannath Puri was so proud to have someone like him, who could speak so eloquently and who could demolish anyone in debate. And the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in Jagannath Puri, they were thinking, if only we had someone like Baladev Vidyabhushan, how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings would spread. But they were very afraid to even approach him because he was such a scholar. But there was one devotee of Lord Chaitanya Sampradaya whose name was Radha Damodar Goswami. And he was a very, very deeply realized soul. So he approached Baladev Vidyabhushan and he began to narrate to him the beautiful pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and the supremacy of the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And when Baladev Vidyabhushan heard this, his heart melted in ecstatic love, an experience he never had by worshipping Narayan in the line of Sri Madhva. And he understood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took initiation in the line of Madhvacharya, so it would not be unchaste or unfaithful for him to become a Gaudiya Vaishnava. So he sat and he listened to Radha Damodar Goswami, and whatever arguments he may have had, Radha Damodar Goswami, in a very humble and gentle way, completely defeated them. So he surrendered to Radha Damodar Goswami, and he gave him a mantra for Radha and Krishna. And he began chanting the holy names in the mood of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Radha Damodar Goswami decided to send him to Vrindavan to study under Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, who he knew was the greatest of all scholars of the Gaudiya Vaishnava line. So when Baladev arrived, Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur understood, here is the man that will assist me in this great mission to the Lord and the Vaishnavas. So he very carefully studied Srimad Bhagavatam and the other Goswamis' literatures from Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, Baladev. And together, they preached so strongly. Not only did they preach, but they were just defeating all opposition to the highest, purest principles of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And they began to revive the temple worship and revive the spirit and the inspiration in the devotees. And they just did tremendous, unbelievable work. They began to again uncover and beautify the holy places. And then Radharaman Chakravarty sent a letter to Viswanath Chakravarty Thakur that he should return to Gauda Desh, to Shayadabad and Devagram. So he returned to his guru, and his guru told him that you have a wife. You've hardly never talked to her or seen her. You've hardly even seen her. And meanwhile, the mother of the wife was very disturbed that the samskaras are not being fulfilled. So the Guru ordered, Radharaman Chakravarty ordered Viswanath Chakravarty Thakur to spend the night with his wife. So as an obedient disciple, he went to spend the night with his wife, Vibha, who was so beautiful, so charming, such a wonderful lady. And they sat in bed together, and Viswanath Chakravarty Thakur just started giving her Srimad Bhagavatam class. And all night They were Srimad Bhagavatam class. He was just leading kirtans and singing Bhagavat and giving commentaries. And the next morning, the wife told Guru that he just was having kirtan and giving me Bhagavat commentaries all night. So the Guru was very happy. He understood that this Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur is of the spiritual world. He has just no inclination for material connections with anyone. So unless you have no material desires whatsoever, you should not imitate Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur and be an irresponsible grihastha, but we could understand what kind of magnitude of his devotion there was. He was the very embodiment, personification of renunciation. So one time, his Guru Maharaj asked him to make a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam for him. So Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur is very famous for this story. It said when he was copying Srimad Bhagavatam for his Guru, as he was writing, whenever the sun came out, clouds came to cover him. So there would be no inconvenience in his writing Srimad Bhagavatam. And sometimes during the monsoons there would be torrents of rain, and he would just sit right out. And the rain would fall torrentially in front of him, behind him, on both sides of him, but not a drop would touch him, as long as he was writing Srimad Bhagavatam. And one time a king, a zamindar, was on his palanquin going by, and he had all kinds of umbrellas around him and servants, and he saw Viswanath sitting on the ground writing, and there was no water on him. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur didn't even know. He didn't know whether there was sun, whether it was rain. He only knew Srimad Bhagavatam. So after preaching and traveling to many of the holy places of Gaudadesh, Sri Radharaman Chakravarti again sent him back to Vrindavan. And when he went back to Vrindavan, he stayed in various places, and he wrote his books in many places. In fact, in his books, he writes where he wrote it, in which places of Vrindavan. So we find that some books he wrote at Radhakund, some at the Radha Gokulananda temple in Vrindavan, some at Govardhan, some at Yavat, the place of the in-laws of Srimati Radharani. And for some time he was living in a cave in Govardhan Hill. And he was constantly absorbed in singing beautiful kirtans and ecstatic love and chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So one night while sleeping in that cave near Govardhan Hill, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him. And he instructed him that you should make commentaries on the principal books of the six Goswamis. You should, because the six Goswamis wrote in such high Sanskrit to establish authority that most Sanskrit scholars couldn't even understand. What to speak of general common people? So Lord Chaitanya told him to write commentaries on the six Goswamis' works in very simple Sanskrit or Bengali. So Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur took this as his great mission in life. And while he was living at Sri Radhakund and Vrindavan and various places, there's a beautiful story that took place. One very, very pure devotee who was a brahmachari came to the Mathura district and Vrindavan. And he was worshipping a beautiful deity named Gokulananda. and how he worshipped with such pure love, with such complete detachment from anything in life except pleasing his deity. This is the real standard of deity worship. That you're not thinking, what do I want? You're only thinking, what does the deity want? You're not thinking, what will I wear today? You're thinking, what will the deity wear today? You don't think, what will I eat today? What will the deity eat today? You're not thinking, what music do I like to hear? You're thinking, what songs does Gokulananda like to hear? True deity worship is every thought, every word, every act is simply for the pleasure of Thakurji. So this is the standard that this brahmachari was worshipping Gokulananda. He was his life, his soul. But one night, in a dream, Gokulananda appeared to this brahmachari and told him, in Vrindavan is living my dear devotee, Viswanath Cakravarty. You kindly present me to him to be worshipped by him. So the next morning, the brahmachari went to Vrindavan, and there he approached Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, and he told him, Krishna has appeared to me in a dream, and he has told me to give my life and soul, my worshipable Lord, to you. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was so humble. He said, I am not qualified to worship this deity. You are so qualified. You are doing such nice seva. I cannot do what you are doing. I cannot accept it. And the brahmachari said, but it is the order of the Lord. You must accept it. He said, but I am instructing you to keep it. So the brahmachari took Gokulananda and went back to his home. And that night, Gokulananda again appeared to him. He said, bring me back to Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. But I will appear to him too, so this time he will accept. So just at the end of the night, as Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was resting, Shri Gokulananda appeared to him. And he said, please do not be in anxiety. I will accept your worship. I will provide the food. I will provide everything. But it is my desire that you accept me and worship me as your Lord. And upon seeing the beautiful form of Gokulananda and hearing his sweet words, Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur began trembling, displaying the symptoms of ecstatic love. And just as soon as the dream was over, Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur woke up. And at that very second, the brahmachari was there holding Gokulananda. He said, please accept this presentation of this deity. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur accepted the deity. And the wonderful, beautiful pastimes that took place between Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur and Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda are a very deep and transcendental subject matter, which is ultimately pleasing to the heart. So he took this deity with him wherever he would go and worship him. And while at Radha Kund, he was given the Govardhan Shila that was personally worshipped by Raghunath Das Goswami. Would you like to hear the story of this Govardhan Shila? This Govardhan Shila was brought from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri and given to Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He worshipped this Shila at all times. He would usually keep it hanging from his neck, and it was always soaked with his tears of love. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw this Govardhan Shila, Giriraj, as the body of Krishna. And as we know, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna in the mood of the love of Srimati Radharani. So Radharani's bhakti, worshipping the beautiful form of Krishna's body in this Shila. And sometimes in the ecstasy of love during kirtans, he would hold the Shila to his head and rub it against his eyes in great respect and devotion. And one time when he was holding it in his hand, his love was so deep that the Shila began to melt in ecstasy, and Lord Chaitanya's thumbprint went into the Govardhan Shila. Raghunath Das Goswami, whose appearance day it is today, we know the story, how he was such a rich young man, coming from an only son of multi-millionaire father and uncle. He left everything to go to Jagannath Puri. And he performed such tapasya, and he was so humble in his service to the devotees that he completely conquered the heart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Seeing the love, the devotion, and the renunciation of Raghunath Das Goswami, who was the servant of his servant, Swarup Damodar Goswami, Lord Chaitanya wanted to reciprocate by giving him the most dear thing to his own heart. So he presented to Raghunath Das Goswami this Govardhan Shila. And he personally instructed him through Swarup Damodar how to worship the Shila. And after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left the planet, soon after Swarup Damodar Goswami left the planet, and Raghunath Das Goswami went to Vrindavan, along with his Govardhan Shila. And by the instructions of Rupan Sanatan Goswami, he decided to settle down at Radha Kund. And there he exhibited Prayojana Bhakti, the supreme ultimate perfection of the love of the gopis for Krishna. And the object of his love was very much centered around his devotion to Govardhan Shila. Sometimes while living in Radha Kund, Lord Chaitanya gave him also a Gunjamala, which is said to be none different than Srimati Radharani. Raghunath Das Goswami was explaining, by giving me this Gunjamala, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given me worship and service to the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. And by giving me this Giriraj Govardhan Shila, he has given me an eternal place at Govardhan Hill, where the most intimate pastimes of Radha Krishna take place, especially during the spring season, beginning with Basant Rasa Yatra, which we are also celebrating today. And Raghunath Das Goswami, the highest standards of love, worshipped this Shila. But before disappearing from this world, he presented the Govardhan Shila to Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami worshipped that Shila with his life and soul. And before he left this world, he gave it to his very intimate servant and disciple, Mukunda Das. Mukunda Das Goswami was worshipping. I was mentioning before Ganga Narayan Chakravarty, one of the most special and devoted disciples of Srila Narottam Das Thakur. It is said that his wife's name was Vishnupriya, and he had one daughter whose name was Krishnapriya. And as I explained before, he adopted Sri Krishna Charan, the Param Guru of Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, as his own son and disciple. But the story of his daughter is one of the most wonderful stories in Vaishnava history. Sri Krishna Priya was such a devotee. She had no interest in material life. She had no interest in marriage. Her only interest was hearing the glories of the Lord and chanting the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare. And her mother and father were so satisfied to see her ecstatic devotion and love. And Ganga Narayan Chakravarty trained her so nicely as a devotee. And eventually, with the blessings of her mother and father, she went to Braj Bhumi with them, and then she settled down at Radha Kund. And she was constantly chanting the holy names, constantly discussing the wonderful pastimes and teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. And the residents of Radha Kund and the residents of all of Braj Bhumi, they just saw her natural devotion and worshipped her. And they would call her by the name of Krishna Priya Thakurani. Some people called her Sri Radha Kund Vasi Thakurani. And one time, Mukunda Das, he saw the qualities of pure unalloyed devotion and was very much impressed and was always showering his blessings upon Krishna Priya Devi. And one time Mukunda Das ate bad food and he became very sick. And Krishna Priya Thakurani gave him a special diet and personally cared for him and made him better. And Mukunda Das, he stated to everyone that this Krishna Priya is my mother. She has the love of my mother. And he was so impressed with her devotion that he gave the Shalagram Shila that was worshipped by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He gave it to Krishna Priya Thakurani to worship. She took that Giriraj and made it her life and soul to worship. A few days after he gave that Shila, Mukunda Das, in separation of the Lord, he returned to the eternal abode of Goloka Vrindavan and disappeared from this world. There was a very famous personality living at that time in Braja. His name was Rupa Kaviraj. And with your permission, I will give you some background about this man. Rupa Kaviraj was a disciple of Krishna Charan Cakravarty Thakur, who was the Param Guru of Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, or the godbrother of Sri Radha Raman Cakravarty. And he became very dear to Sri Krishna Charan Cakravarty. He learned Srimad Bhagavatam from him. He traveled to holy places to him. In fact, Sri Krishna Charan and Rupa Kaviraj traveled all the way from Shayadabad in Bengal to Braj Bhumi. And while at Radha Kund, Rupa Kaviraj asked if he could stay and study under Mukunda Das, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sri Krishna Charan Cakravarty gave him all blessings, gave him all knowledge. And then he studied under Mukunda Das and became very dear to him. And he gave him all understandings of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he was actually exhibiting symptoms of love of God. And he became so famous as being such an orator, such a devotee, that he started giving Srimad Bhagavatam recitations at Radha Kund. So one day when he was just to begin his Srimad Bhagavatam class, Srimati Krishna Priya Thakurani, in her own very humble and gentle way, simply came to attend the class. And all the Brijabasis and Gaudiya Vaishnavas, with great respect, they honored her and greeted her. But Rupa Kaviraj did not give her any attention whatsoever. And then he began his talk. And Krishna Priya was just so happy. She didn't mind that he didn't give any attention. Amani namana dena kirtaniya sadari. One who always chants the holy name does not care any respect for anyone, from anyone. She just wants to offer respect. She offered all respect, and when he ignored her and neglected her, She was just in complete bliss and ecstasy just to sit there and listen to Krishna Katha. So as he was speaking, she was just so happily listening. And then he stopped the class. And he looked at her with great anger and disgust. How are you doing two things at the same time? Your lips are moving and you are chanting the holy names, and you're supposed to be listening to the Srimad Bhagavatam that I'm giving recitation of? How do you do two things at the same time? It is not possible. Why you are disturbing like this? And Krishna Priya Devi, with very gentle and soft voice, great humility, she said, it is just my habit that my tongue always moves to chant the holy name. It's a habit. I'm not doing it on purpose. But actually, I'm hearing every word you're speaking with complete attention, even though my tongue may be moving due to habit. And when she said this, he became furious. He just sat there and looked at her with such negativity, with such anger, with such an offensive mentality, that even though he was such a learned scholar and such an elevated devotee, exhibiting symptoms of love of God, at that moment, all of his qualities were lost. He became contemptuous to Lord Chaitanya. He became contemptuous to his guru and to all the Vaishnavas. All of his luster, all of his ecstasies diminished. And his false pride began to swell like the ocean. He became so egoistic, so proud. He became so offensive that he concocted his own interpretation of Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And because he was so learned and so scholarly, and already he was so famous, that people were accepting it. He started preaching such deviations that unless one is in a renounced order of life, he cannot be a guru or initiate anyone. If one is grihastha, it is forbidden, he cannot initiate. Advaitacharya initiated. Srinivasacharya initiated. It was a concoction, but he was preaching it boldly. After all, he was in the renounced order of life. He also started teaching Raganuga Bhakti, very freely giving the very high sadhana of Raganuga, without consideration of the necessity of Vaidhi Bhakti. He was teaching there is no need for strict rules or regulations or anything like this. He was giving people direct entrance into the conjugal mellows of Radha and Krishna, which is Sahajiyism. And he was preaching that smaranam, always remembering the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna, is the purification of the heart. There is no need for shravana or kirtanam. There's no need for chanting japa. There's no need for kirtan. There's no need for hearing them. You just remember. So in this way, he was spreading these deviations, and so many people were becoming contaminated. Anyways, Krishna Priya simply tolerated, and this Rupa Kaviraj, he became so demoniac that the acharyas in Braja just couldn't tolerate him anymore. And he started getting sick. So he left Braja and went back to his guru, Sri Krishna Charan, in Shayadabad. But he had already so much offended his guru by misrepresenting him and rejecting him. He tried to pretend that nothing happened, but everybody knew. So in great shame and embarrassment, he went to Orissa, to one village, and there he contracted terrible leprosy. And all of his limbs just decayed, and he suffered miserably. And ultimately he died a terrible death and became a ghost. And in that area, if anyone seriously offended Vaishnavas, that ghost of Rup Kaviraj had access to haunt them. So when people started getting haunted by the ghost of Rupa Kaviraj, they knew, I must have offended a Vaishnava. So people were very strict not to offend Vaishnavas, because they didn't want this rascal to haunt them. So someone may ask the question, how is it that a person so learned, who had such special blessings from Mukunda Das, the disciple of Krishna Das Kaviraj, he had such blessings from Krishna Charan, his own guru, he was so learned, he was actually exhibiting loving symptoms. How is it that he could fall to such a miserable condition? And it is explained, the reason. Because he offended a great devotee. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita explains, even if you are on the state of love of God, if you offend great devotees, you fall like this. So we should be very, very careful not to enviously commit offenses to great devotees of the Lord. It's a very shocking lesson for all of us to hear and learn from. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, while living at Sri Radhakund, became so dear to all the Vaishnavas that Srimati Krishna Priya Thakurani, with great love and attention, presented the Govardhan Shila of Raghunath Das Goswami, Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur to worship. So he placed the Govardhan Shila beside Sri Radha Gokulananda and worshipped them with great love together. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, while living in Vrindavan, along with Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan, they became such prolific writers. He went deeper and deeper and deeper into elaborate commentaries on the works of the six Goswamis. And his commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called a Sharartha Darshani, is one of the most illustrious and most important of all commentaries. Srila Prabhupada profusely quotes Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur's commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam. And he also wrote commentary on Bhagavad Gita called Sharartha Varshani. And in that Bhagavad Gita, of course, Srila Prabhupada's commentary of Bhagavad Gita is primarily based on the commentaries of Baladev and Viswanath. And Srila Prabhupada explains how, when he was at one of the most critical junctions of his life, of leaving behind everything of this world and dedicating his full life to the service of his guru by spreading Lord Chaitanya's teachings in English all over the world. The point in the junction of his life that actually just got him to just give up everything for that purpose was when he was reading the commentary of Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur's Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada told us this story many times. He read the verse, Vyavashayatmaka budhir ekeha kurunandana bahushaka hinantascha budhayo vyavashayanam. The one who is on this path is resolute in purpose. They are determined. Their aim is one. Those who are not on this path, their intelligence is many-branched. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur comments in this regard, one must make the order of one's spiritual master one's life and soul. And when Srila Prabhupada read that, falling at the feet in an ultimate ocean of humility at the lotus feet of Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur for this inspiration, he left everything behind and gave his whole life to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. It is by the inspiration of Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur that we are all here today. Because by that inspiration, Srila Prabhupada has given the supreme sacrifice of his life to help us all become Krishna conscious and happily chant the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur wrote over 40 books. And he also composed beautiful, beautiful songs and poetry, and bhajans, kirtans. One time he was writing an explanation of the Kam Gayatri mantra. And in this beautiful dissertation, which is very famous even to this day, he read in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was explaining the Kam Gayatri mantra to Srila Sanatana Goswami. And he said that it is 24 and a half syllables. But Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, when he chanted the Kam Gayatri mantra, he counted 25 syllables. So he was wondering, how is this? I'm counting 25? And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he was directly inspired by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's none other than Vedavyas himself. He has to be correct. He cannot be wrong. And then he started studying other scriptures. And every scripture, the Kam Gayatri mantra, he was finding it had 25 syllables. And then he read another scripture, because Kam Gayatri was revealed, it's a glorification of Krishna by Srimati Radharani, and how she has 25 qualities. So he was wondering, how am I going to present this? And he was so serious about everything he did that for weeks he was just studying scripture after scripture after scripture and praying and doing intense sadhana to try to get Krishna to reveal the answer. But he could not resolve this apparent contradiction. So he sat on the banks of Radhakund and decided to just fast until he either died or understood the answer. These Vaishnavas were very sincere. And sitting on Radhakund one night, he began to rest, fell asleep, and Srimati Radharani appeared to him. And Srimati Radharani told him that actually what Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is saying is correct. Because the Kam Gayatri mantra represents 24 and a half moons on the body of Krishna. His toenails and his fingernails are moons. That is 20. And then his cheeks are moons, and his forehead is moon, and his face is moon. So many moons. They each represent a moon. And Srimati Radharani said, because his forehead is shaped like a crescent, it is only a half a moon. It is not a full moon. All the other moons are full. And then she told him a scripture where it describes this. Therefore, there's only 24 and a half moons on Krishna's body. And then she described the two syllables, Ya and Vi. When these two syllables, Ya and Vi, are one after another, it is considered only half a syllable. And she told him the scripture where he could find this evidence. And then she disappeared. And he went to that scripture, and sure enough, he found that there was only 24 and a half syllables in Kam Gayatri Mantra. But in the process, he had the beautiful darshan of Srimati Radharani and his blessing, her blessings. And then he wrote that wonderful dissertation. Not only was he writing these sweet commentaries and translations, but also he was very boldly fighting against all resistance and deviations. He and Baladev Vidyabhushan were ferocious to those who were deviants. And yet they were the reservoir of the sweetest nectar to those who were good Vaishnavas. One of his greatest attacks was to the philosophy of Rupa Kaviraj, because he had spread this sahaja poison all around. And Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, he preached like a lion against it. He, even in his commentaries of Bhagavatam, third canto, he defeats it. And also the caste Goswamis were very prominent in Vrindavan at the time. At that time, people who were born of the dynasty of Lord Nityananda or Sri Advaitacharya, or the descendants of pujaris of the six Goswamis, they considered themselves gurus, acharyas, simply because of the birth of the family they were born in. And many of them were engaged in unscrupulous activities. They were making the deity worship a business rather than an act of devotion, and they were cheating people. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was very boldly defeating this idea of caste by birth or Goswami by birth. And he exposed all these people and established that real Goswami is one who has the characteristics of a pure devotee of the Lord, whose senses are completely engaged in the service of the Lord. So he was a great warrior for Krishna. And when he was about 68 years old, he had just finished his his Srimad Bhagavatam commentary. At that time, there was a very serious attack to the whole Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It took place in Jaipur. What happened is, the Goswamis' deities were sent to Jaipur, and Srila Rupa Goswami's deity of Radha Govinda became the personal deity of the king, Jai Singh. And he accepted the teachings of Rupa Goswami. And later on, as we know, the deity of Srimati Radharani was also placed near Radha Govindaji. We discussed that pastime in Jaipur. So, they were worshipping Radha Govinda together. And there was a deity of Narayan, and they would worship Narayan after Radha and Krishna, because Radha Krishna is the source of Narayan. At that time, in a place called Galta, not far from Jaipur, there was a gathering of Vaishnavas from the Ramanandi Sampradaya. a branch of the Sri Sampradaya. And they were very, very much disturbed because all the main temples in Jaipur were Gaudiya Vaishnava temples. Radha Gopinath, Radha Vinod, Radha Damodar, Radha Govinda. The king was a Gaudiya Vaishnava. So they wanted to take over all those temples. So what they did is they started propaganda against the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. The first propaganda was that the king was committing offense due to the influence of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because Narayan is the supreme and he's worshipping Krishna before Narayan. This is a great offense. It must be stopped. And in order for it to stop, we have to kick out all these Gaudiya Vaishnavas. They're ruining the Siddhanta of the Vedas. And the second thing is they were worshipping a deity next of Radharani. They said this is not bona fide. Where do we find? Vishnu Purana doesn't even say the name of Radharani. And they started quoting all these scriptures, how Radharani's name is not anywhere. So this was a great attack. And the devotees of Jaipur, the Goswamis, approached Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, that this is Rupa Goswami's deity. And the king was so afraid that he actually removed Srimati Radharani and put her in a different room and secretly worshipped her separately. So the devotees in Vrindavan, Rupa Goswami's Govinda is separated from Radharani, and they want to take the worship away from us. We have to do something. So ultimately the king, he agreed to the Ramanandis that if someone from Gaudiya Sampradaya can philosophically win a debate and establish the truths and the bona fideness of what they were doing, then they could keep the worship. So they said, all right. At the time, Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was very old, and his health was not very good. And the long, arduous travel to Jaipur was very difficult. So he called upon his very intimate, loving associate and disciple, Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. He was Vishwanath's Shiksha disciple. And he told him, you please go to Galta and you solve this problem. So Baladev Vidyabhushan went. First he met the king, and the king said, I don't know what to do. You have to save us. The whole prestige of our sampradaya is finished unless you do something. So he went and he began to debate all these points. And he completely defeated them on all points. But then they said that we cannot accept your sampradaya as bona fide unless your sampradaya has a commentary of Vedanta Sutra. So he started quoting Madhvacharya's commentary of Vedanta Sutra, because he was initiated in the Madhva Sampradaya from the Tattvavadis. And when he explained Madhvacharya's conclusions, the Ramanandis understood that they could not defeat him. So they said, but Madhvacharya accepts Narayan as supreme. Where in his commentary does it talk about worshipping a deity of Radharani? So your Gaudiya Sampradaya is a branch of Madhva, and it cannot be accepted, it must be rejected unless you have a proper commentary of Vedanta Sutra. And we will not hear another word from you until you give us this commentary. He said that the Goswamis understood that Srimad Bhagavatam is Vedavyasa's commentary of Vedanta Sutra. And therefore Jiva Goswami wrote his Satsandarbhas, which are just explanations of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's no need for anything else. But they explained to him that you are rejected and all you Gaudiya Vaishnavas have to leave, and you have to give us your deities, and you have to do everything our way unless you give us a proper commentary, direct, Brahma Sutra. So he was very disappointed. And he went back to his room and he began to pray to Radha Govinda to save not only to save the dignity of the whole sampradaya that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descended to this world to give to everyone. Namo Mahabharanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaudatveshe Namaha. He's the most munificent, the most merciful of all incarnations. He's come to give what no other avatar has ever given. Pure, unalloyed love of the residents of Vrindavan to everyone and anyone freely who simply accept his mercy and loudly chant the holy name. Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki. And now, the whole sampradaya of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was about to attain extinction, where all its validity, all its credibility was about to be taken away. If this happens, what will happen to the people of Kali Yuga? The Yuga avatar and all of his teachings and all of his followers will be disregarded. You can understand, this was one of the most major crises as far as the salvation of mankind in history of the universe. So he prayed to Radha Govinda. And that night, Govindaji appeared to him in a dream. And he said, "You just write, and I will speak my commentary of Vedanta Sutra." Baladev Vidyabhushan got up from his sleep and he went to Radha Govinda's temple. And in front of the deity of Sri Radha Govinda Dev, he began to write. And Govinda Dev from within and without inspired him and gave him all the words. And this beautiful commentary of Vedanta Sutra he named Sri Govinda Bhasya, that which has been inspired and spoken by Govinda himself. And he went and he presented that commentary to the Ramanandis, and when they read it, they all fell at his feet and begged, "Initiate us. We will be your disciples." He said, "No need for initiation. You are already initiated. Just chant the holy names." Baladev Vidyabhushan returned to Vrindavan with this news of victory for the Sampradaya. Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, his Shiksha Guru, was overwhelmed with ecstatic joy and love. And he just profusely congratulated with great gratitude Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. And of course, Baladev Vidyabhushan gave all credit to Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, because it was simply in attempting to carry out his order that this empowerment of Sri Radha Govinda came upon him. Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur, shortly after this, became completely immersed in just hearing and chanting the glories of the Leela of Radha and Krishna, Gauranga Mahaprabhu. On the banks of Sri Radha Kund, he began composing beautiful, beautiful songs, one song after another, immersed in kirtan at all times. And while chanting the beautiful kirtan of the holy names and glories of the Lord, absorbed in the ecstatic love of the Leela of Radha and Krishna, on the very, very auspicious and sacred day of Sri Vasant Panchami, Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur entered into Mahasamadhi. and his soul was transported again to the eternal Leela of Radha Krishna in the spiritual world of Goloka Vrindavan. On the most auspicious day, in the most auspicious place of Radha Kund, while chanting the most auspicious names of Radha and Krishna, Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur departed from our earthly vision. And the Vaishnavas placed his samadhi at Sri Radha Gokulananda Temple in Vrindavan, just beside Ganga Narayan Chakravarti, Narottam Das Thakur, and Lokanath Goswami's samadhis. So on this day, even many hundreds of years later, devotees go to this holy place to offer their homage and worship Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. In fact, the presence of his divine mercy is so much existing in our everyday life. When we read Srila Prabhupada's books, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, we are so much getting the nectar of the love of Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur fed to us perfectly through the loving hands of Srila Prabhupada. And every morning, the first thing we do, it is said something that is auspicious should be done first thing. The acharyas in our line have taught us that the first thing we should do when we come up in the morning is to come to attend Mangal Arati. And the first song we sing is the beautiful poem, Gurvastakam, written by Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. In this song, the most powerful, instructive, and beautiful glorification of the spiritual master has been revealed. And it is my humble request that we bring a close to this class on the life of Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur by singing Gurvastakam, the 8 prayers in glorification of the spiritual master. Samsara dava naladida loka Ranaya karuna gana ganatvam Praptasya kalyana gunanavasya Vande Guru Sri Sharanarvindam Praptasya kalyana gunanavasya Vande Guru Sri Sharanarvindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nritya Gita Vaditra Madhyan Manasorasina Jagannath Das's son was also present, whose name was Narahari, who later became known as Narahari Chakravarti, who was the author of Bhakti Ratnakar, Narottam Vilas, as well as most of the information we have of Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur. He also put that into writing. Some of the greatest literatures in our whole Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya were written by Narahari Cakravarty. Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was his Param Guru. Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur was considered Rasacharya because in his commentaries of Srimad Bhagavatam, especially the 10th canto, he described, actually he was directly empowered by Srimati Radharani and Lord Gaurachandra to describe the most wonderful and incredibly profound explanations of Krishna's Leela, and how he, by his inspiration, all supported by great details of the various revealed scriptures, is something that is very dear to the heart of all devotees. And in Srila Prabhupada's books, by Srila Prabhupada's own loving hands, he is presenting these same conclusions to us. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, as we explained before, considered Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur to be the guardian, the protector of our sampradaya. So on this holy day, we should pray for his mercy, because on these special days, these great souls actually incarnate within these days. These days are like deities of these great souls. And we could worship these personalities and receive their direct blessings and mercy on these holy days if we observe them according to the divine instructions of our spiritual master in the Parampara. Today is also, of course, Vasant Panchami, Sri Vishnu, the appearance day of Sri Vishnu Priya Devi, the eternal consort of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Saraswati Puja, the appearance day of Srila Pundarik Vidyanidhi, Vrishabhanu of Mahaprabhu's Leela, and also the spiritual master of Gadadhar Pandit, Srila Raghunandan Thakur's appearance day, one of the very intimate and important associates of Lord Chaitanya, and it is the appearance day of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami. I think we do not have time to discuss everything this morning, but this evening we're having festival, so we will try to continue. Be here at 6:30 promptly. At exactly 6:30, we hope to begin our Shobha Yatra, where we will do Harinam Sankirtan along with the Vijay Murtis of Radha Gopinath along the sacred sands of Chopati Beach. We will come back to the sacred because Prabhupada's feet walked on them every day for some time. And then we will come back to the temple for further narrations and kirtan and prasad. There'll be wonderful flower decorations for the deities today also. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath ki, Srila Viswanath Cakravarty Thakur ki, Gopimanandi.